is Andy Burnham? I feel like Steve Martin and the Jerk. Who is Maven Johnson? Who is Andy Burnham, the new Prime Minister, the former mayor of Greater Manchester, across the pond in merry old England? Less merry these days. Well, President Trump doesn't seem so sanguine about Mr. Burnham representing a market change from Mr. Sturmer, but we'll see. We'll see. Nowhere to go but up after two-tier cure, I would think. And there's some notes that Burnham has struck that are encouraging, including his promotion of subsidiarity. Took away something from his Catholic upbringing. Devolving power away from the central government to local governments. Okay. And then there are other indications that we're not going to get much more help than we've been getting from the UK. For example, a British AI professional posting on X. I suspected Burnham's new cabinet had no private sector experience, but it's starker than I thought. 2, at a push 3 of the cabinet members have done anything other than be a council worker, charity or union employee, or labor staffer. Big government is about to get bigger. Yeah, well, that's the model we have in blue states in this country, too, like Illinois. Understand that. That's somewhat concerning. These other matters are more concerning when it comes to security in the West, particularly against Islamists and totalitarians of all stripes. The Spectator reporting that Burnham may hire an individual who called 9/11 a false flag that the U.S. knew of in advance, has made critical comments of, essentially the anti-Semitic variety against Jews, defended an advocacy group that called Jihadi John a, quote, beautiful young man, unquote, and said the exposés of the child grooming scandals in the UK, Pakistani rape gangs, for example, racist. Ali Malani is his name. He's the chair of the Labour Muslim Network, has been working closely with Burnham at the run-up to his election and helping with social media, and been repeatedly spoken of as an expected hire on Burnham's digital comms team. That's the Spectator reporting on that. Additionally, Ed Miliband as Foreign Secretary, the Stephen Pollard, who writes for the Spectator, Telegraph. In the summer of on Miliband, the summer of 2013, evidence emerged that Bashar al-Assad had been using chemical weapons against his own people, crossing what Barack Obama, of course, had set down as a red line at the time. Then PM David Cameron sought parliamentary approval for Britain to join limited military action alongside the U.S. in defense of what he called the longstanding international taboo against using chemical weapons. Miliband chose to whip Labour MPs against the government, and the motion to support the U.S. mission against Assad was defeated. Pollard writing, not only was it a day of shame for Britain, it had global impact. Obama feared a repeat in Congress and so backed away. Assad was that sent a clear signal, butcher your own people with chemical weapons and the West will look the other way. It also sent a signal to Putin that the West was weak, and he soon after invaded Crimea. A chain reaction. So what can we expect? For more on this, please be joined by Eliot Wilson, contributing editor at Defense on the Brink, senior fellow for national security at the Coalition for Global. Eliot, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
You wrote, and I want to get to your the headline of a piece that you wrote about Burnham is Burnham just Tony Blair in a T-shirt. What does that mean?
I think the problem with Andy Burnham is to distinguish how much is about sort of outward style, because he's made a lot of his kind of man of the people. He doesn't wear a suit now. When he was mayor of Greater Manchester, he sort of dressed much more informally. He liked to make a big thing of being an ordinary person, that kind of stuff, and how much is actually significant differences in how he's going to do government. But he talked a lot about how it's going to be a new way of doing things. But new prime ministers always say that, and it often doesn't turn out to be true. So it's difficult to distinguish, how much he's going to change and really be a sort of a new direction, how much it's really going to be the same old kind of vaguely statist, interventionist government that we've had from Turkey Starmer over the past 2 years, but with a sort of more friendly smile. And if that's the case, then I think, the Labour Party and indeed the country has not much to look forward to, because the change that everybody says is needed is not really going to come from him.
Yeah, and he's made noise, in opposition to sort of Thatcherite policies from the 80s as something that he rejects. So if he rejects, opening up the economy in the UK, then where else do you go with the statism that was featured under Starmer?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he's talked a lot about 40 years of failed neoliberalism. Now, we're not quite sure what he means by neoliberalism, but essentially he seems to draw the line at about 1980 and say everything after that was bad, and everything before that, presumably by extension, was good. Now, most people who remember the 1970s, certainly in this country, and I think probably in the States as well, don't remember it particularly fondly as a time of great entrepreneurship, economic prosperity, and progress. In this country, we had very powerful trades unions who were keeping the industry crippled by strikes. We had a very poor economy. Inflation was rampant. We had obviously oil crises, and yes, that seems to be Andy Burnham's kind of happy memory. In a sort of, he was born in 1970, I think, so that's his childhood. But that seems to be what he harks back to as some golden age of cooperation over the economy and a happy society. And I think that's, if he rejects everything that came after that, then he's rejecting really quite a lot of what most people have regarded as the settled economic consensus. Even Tony Blair said, we're all Thatcherites now, and I think that to try to go back to some mythical 1970s, certainly in economic terms, is a very bold departure, and not one that I think many people would really support.
If he's serious about the overtures he's made in the direction of subsidiarity, devolving power away from the central government to local governments, coming as he is from a mayoralty, although he previously was a central government functionary too. But if he's serious about that, what kind of impact would that have in Britain?
That would be welcome. I mean, it's long been one of the problems in Britain that we are a very over-centralised country, partly because local government lost a lot of its functions in the 1980s. It's lost a lot of responsibility. And at the moment, we have local authorities in this country which basically act as sort of channels for central government money to go back out to the local regions. So I think a bit of autonomy in big places like Manchester and Birmingham and even in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as well would be good. The difficulty is how you manage that, how you make it accountable and how you make it responsible. Because if you are giving lots of spending powers to local authorities, they also really should be responsible for the taxation that's collected. You're much more familiar with it, obviously, in a federal system, but we have a very, very dominant central state which dictates policy and also collects revenue and then doles it back out. I think if you can manage some kind of furthering out of responsibility to local regions, provided there is that necessary accountability and responsibility that goes with it, that may be good. But it's still all very inchoate at the moment. I mean, he's not really put much flesh on the bones.
On the national security front, what about those examples that are being bandied about of his alliance with appeasers and Islamists, frankly? Is that a concern?
I think there are two things. The first is that I don't think he's very interested in defence and foreign affairs, which is unusual for British prime ministers. I mean, mostly they become, if anything, over-interested in foreign affairs because they discover that when you go abroad, people are nice to you, whereas when you're at home, people aren't so nice to you. Sooner or later, most prime ministers fall prey to the let's go on another foreign trip. Secondly, I think the Labour Party has a problem, and it's had a long-standing problem, that it's made alliances, or at least it's made peace with groups into whose real beliefs and real backgrounds, it hasn't really inquired very hard. And I think particularly a lot of more extreme Islamist groups, it's kind of made an accommodation with them for electoral reasons or simply to want to seem to be, pluralist and inclusive. And it almost shuts its ears to some of the really dark things that they're saying, as if, they don't really mean it. And I think what we're seeing now, particularly with the rise of anti-Semitism again and some of the appalling attacks on Jewish targets in this country, is that, no, these extreme fundamentalist Islamists mean what they say, and they will do what they mean. And I think the Labour Party has probably spent too long ignoring that and thinking that that's not a problem or something which will go away. Now, whether he carries that on into, really actually giving power to any of these people or giving them any access to sort of central government or that kind of thing, or whether he is now going to, he'll be briefed properly by the intelligence services, which will be a help. Whether he can draw a line in the sand and say, actually, no, this is a problem that we do need to address, because, by any margin, Islamist fundamentalism is still the biggest terrorist threat we face in this country. The security services sometimes are forced to talk about, right-wing extremism, which is a problem, but it's not nearly as big a problem. It's not nearly as difficult to grapple with a problem as Islamism. Whether he's able now to turn around and say, oh, actually, no, now I'm in the big job, now I've got the responsibility and the information, I'll need to do things a bit differently, I don't know. But, I think that's a kind of overarching issue for him. Whether he's able now to go from running what was a big city in Manchester, but, 3 million people, but with a limited range of responsibilities, to running a country which is the 5th biggest economy in the world. It's a big shift, and I don't know if he's yet really grappled with the full understanding of that.
Is there any indication that he has an interest in breathing new life into the so-called special relationship between Britain and the U.S. In a way that Starmer clearly did not?
It's difficult to say. Keir Starmer tried at the beginning, when he first went to Washington and delivered the invitation to President Trump for his state visit. That was seen as going quite well. I think it all tailed off rather badly after that. As I say, Burnham is not really a man about whose foreign policy instincts we know very much, because he's never done a foreign policy job. He's never shown much interest in foreign policy. He seems to be very much a domestically focused prime minister. So whether that will now be left in the hands of, Ed Miliband as foreign secretary, Wes Streeting, the new defence secretary, and Jonathan Powell is remaining in place as national security advisor, who, of course, is long and experienced in these matters. But we do really have a bit of a blank there, because it's not something that Burnham has talked much about, except to, make the usual sort of progressive noises about, bad things happening in America. But, it really is, we are looking at a blank sheet of paper, really, and it would be nice for him to fill in some words.
What kind of time frame does he have to prove up or not in terms of, the prospect of Brits making a change in leadership altogether in the direction of maybe Nigel Farage or the Conservatives?
Well, it's hard to say. We don't need to have a general election until the middle of 2029. So in a sense, he could have 3 years. But we're also being shown by every passing year that, things come at you fast. Mm-hmm. We've now had 6 prime ministers in 7 years, which is an unprecedented rate of change. And I think the problem is that the political parties have become too used to the ability just to think, oh, well, we'll try someone else. And I think both parties would do well to sit down and think, no, once you pick somebody, you need to consider that as your final choice for quite a while. So, it could be that Burnham is in for 3 years and goes into an election in the middle of 2029. If there is some crisis, it could be that he decides to have an earlier election. I think he's obviously decided not to go immediately for an election to try and seek a sort of, not that it works constitutionally, but as a kind of individual mandate. Because I think if he were going to do that, he would already have done something about it by now. But we are in uncharted territory. We have a rate of turnover of prime ministers that we've never seen before. So it is slightly the sort of guesswork. I would hope that we now have a bit of stability and we can have a parliament of a normal length, which gets us through to 2028, because I don't think it does the public any good, really, to be thinking, oh, well, this will all change anyway, we can all vote for something different tomorrow. I think the public needs to be aware, just as politicians do, that when you make a choice, it has a certain longevity. You're used to this, of course, because you vote for something that's for 4 years, or for 2 years, I suppose, in the House of Representatives. But I think when you vote for something, you do need to own it for a bit. And I think that would be a welcome lesson for all of us in this country.
Eliot Wilson, contributing editor at Defense on the Brink, senior fellow for national security, Coalition for Global. Eliot, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.
And he joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Adult Beverage Solutions is looking for a brand ambassador in all areas for beverage sampling events. You have the ability to create your own schedule because most events take place Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at local grocery stores